Arnold from the Netherlands Interdisciplinary Demographic Institute is going to give us a live demo of that Resilient Regions Policy Dashboard, a knowledge tool and digital community to tackle demographic decline. And then we will have more conversation about that, and we'll have Anne-Catherine here as well to help answer questions. So let's have a look at the practical demonstration, and then feel free to have notes ready to ask questions at the end.
Hello, yes, thank you very much. Thank you for that kind introduction. Yeah, I'm Becky Arnold. I'm a researcher in the Premium Project. I worked on a lot of different aspects of this very big, sprawling project. Most of my research was focused on the regional development side. But I also had another role in the project, which is why I'm talking to you all today, which I was the lead scientific designer of the dashboard that I'm going to demonstrate for you, although obviously this was a huge team effort and lots of other people worked very, very hard on this. Now, as you will have gathered from the talks you've heard already today, the Premium EU project is a big project. There's lots of different aspects to it, dealing with lots of different types of data. And we've produced so many, academic papers covering all the interesting things that we've found out. But we are very conscious that academic papers are not the best way to reach policymakers. And that's really what this project is about, getting evidence to help inform policymakers as they make their decisions. So the point of this dashboard is to take this big, sprawling, very technical research project and make it in an online, interactive way so that policymakers and everybody can access it and learn from it and benefit from this taxpayer-funded research. One other quick word I want to mention about the dashboard is that it was made for policymakers, but it was also made with policymakers. So as you know, the scientific designer of the dashboard, me and many of the other people that worked on it, spoke to researchers across the consortium, asking them, what are your key findings? What have you found out that's new that we really need to tell people? How do we best show your research? But we also crucially spoke to policymakers throughout this process. The way that we did this was via our Resilient Regions expert group, which was a group of policymakers that we assembled for this project who very kindly gave a lot of their time answering questions for us like, what of this research is most relevant to you? How do we show it in a way that is clear and intuitive for policymakers? And with their help, this was iteratively developed from my earliest horrible sketches, which you can't blackmail me with, to the actual live dashboard, which I'm going to demonstrate for you today. So if I leave this, then you should be able to see this. Is this coming through on all your screens properly? Okay, wonderful. So this is the home page of the dashboard. So you've got some information here about what the dashboard is and how it works. And then you've got these three portals here. The first portal is really about your region. So within it, you select your region, and we tell you things like, these are the policies that we think might be relevant to your region. We tell you about your region's development status, its history, its strengths and weaknesses. And we also tell you about your region's migration and population trends, both for now, but also for the future. Then you've got Portal 2 and 3. They kind of zoom out, so they focus at the European scale. So Portal 2 looks at regional development at the European scale. So you can see how your region, having learned about your region's development status, fits into that big picture. Then Portal 3 looks at migration and population trends at the European scale. Again, so having learned about your region's migration and population, you can zoom out and see the big picture. Something that's also in this third portal, which I think is really interesting, is that we also have quotes and interviews and stories from migrants themselves, which I think is really relevant to policymakers that want to attract people back to regions facing depopulation, or just policymakers in general that want a more nuanced perspective. So I'll take you through this one portal at a time, starting with Portal 1, which is kind of the densest one. And the first thing you'll see here is this map of Europe, and you can select your region. And you can do that via these drop-down menus here. Sorry, it's very slow in the EU for some reason. I've worked on this on many other computers, but it's slow here. So you can select your region via the drop-down menu, or you can, zoom in and move the map around and say, let's say this is my region. And the first thing you'll see is the policies that we think are relevant to your region. Now, the way we identify policies that are relevant to your region is by region types. So when we were doing all our research on regional development and urbanization and so on, we collected regions into these different types. And the way we decide if a policy is relevant to your region or not is if it was applied in a region with the same type as yours. Because we assume that if a region is similar to yours, it's likely to be facing similar challenges, and therefore we think this policy may be of interest to you. So if you scroll down here, you see a great big long list of policies, and you can look at them and say, okay, this first one, building small and cheap housing opportunities for young people to stop them leaving. So this is very relevant to, a lot of people here, keeping young people in regions, particularly rural regions or left behind regions facing depopulation. So if you look at a policy and you think, okay, that's interesting, I would like to know more about that, you can click on it. You'll get a bit more information. You'll get a longer description. You'll get the region that we found this policy from, and you'll get a link to the original document or website, and so that you can see all the details. So if you're deciding, okay, I think this is a useful policy for me, or this is not a useful policy for me, or I might have to adapt it in some way, you can get all the details from the original source. Now, this is a very, very long list of policies, and it's a bit overwhelming, but we want to help you to find what you are looking for, the answers that you need. So we've got these tags up here, so you can select policies of types that are of interest to you. So let's say that you already know that you want to do something around, say, climate change or environmental protection or governance. Let's say it's governance. You want to do something in that kind of area. You'll notice that this list up here updates based on which tags are selected. So it will now only include policies that have at least one of the tags that you have selected. So helping you narrow down to find the answers that you are looking for. There's another way you can filter as well, which is by the policy origin. So we, as researchers, went out and looked for regional development policies that we thought were of interest and relevant, and we summarised them ourselves and include them in the dashboard ourselves. But there's a lot of policies out there, and Europe is big, and lots of people are working really hard trying to make, their regions better. So we developed, or more specifically, Peter developed, a very innovative AI tool which automatically scrapes from the websites of governments at different levels across Europe, and automatically identifies policy documents and automatically generates a summary of that and includes them in the dashboard. So if you want to just see verified policies that we as researchers have looked at, you can select those. If you just want to look at AI policies, you can select those. There's another filter as well. So when we were looking at policy documents and summarising them, we noticed that a lot of the documents we found weren't policies, they were great big policy packs. So things like the Agricultural Development Plan from 2025 to 2035 for a specific region. Now, that's not a policy, it's like 50 policies, but they're still really interesting and useful documents for a lot of people, and we wanted to include them as well. But we are also very conscious that you might only have the time or the budget to do like one simple thing. So if you're only interested in finding like a single policy, you can filter just so many policies. But if you are looking for these big integrated strategic packs, you can filter show me these policy programs, we call them as well. So that's kind of tab one. Now we move on to this one, which is telling me about my region's regional development. So if I do that, we can see that this region is very rural, it's developed, and it's improving. So that's good. You can see the scores as well in the different development indicators. So it's scoring 6 out of 10 economic, 6 out of 10 social, 6 out of 10 living environment, and overall, because it's improving across all of those, it's got a score of 7 out of 10. So it's not just So this is helping you as a policymaker identify where you are strong and where you are weak and what might need attention to help you make those decisions around where you are going to focus your energy and your budget. And we discuss the strengths and weaknesses of your region with regards to regional development here in more detail. Also here, we've got a national comparison. Now, there's many ways that the policymakers of our Resilient Regions Expert Group contributed to this project, but this is just one of the ways. These scores are European-wide, but that was something that these policymakers really highlighted is, I would really like to know how I compare to regions in my country as well. So we've got this here. And if you look at this, this is doing very well in, so it's in the top 18% for economics in the country, but it's in the bottom 20% in the social conditions for the country. So if I'm a policymaker, that might tell me, okay, I really want to focus on the social dimension because I'm falling behind with regards to the rest of the regions in my country there. Down here, you've got the development scores over time. So again, this helps you find what might need attention. So this region kind of had a bit of plateau. It showed some improvement, but there's some kind of concern there as well. So helping you identify what you want to address. You can also find comparable regions. So I mentioned that for the policies, we group regions into types. This has some information about how we do that. Some of these regions, sort of strengths and weaknesses and challenges. And here we've got a map of all the regions of the same type. And you can zoom in and move around and get the regions' names like this. Which, if you are a policymaker looking for what are the regions facing the same challenges as me, where can I reach out to network or to exchange ideas, this helps you with doing that. Moving on to the third tab here, this is about the migration and population of your region. So the first thing that comes up, this region is experiencing population decline. There is natural decline, so more people are dying than are being born in this region. There is net out migration, so people are leaving. It's a very old population and it is aging rapidly. So these are useful things for a policymaker to know and to be able to react to. We go over the strengths and weaknesses of the region with regards to demographics, and also we've got a graph here which shows you a projection of net migration in your region, so giving you a forecast so you can react. So it's broken down by age by default, so the purple line here is the 65 plus. That's positive, so older people are tending to move into this region. Then the other lines, which are all the younger people, they're all negative. So young people are leaving, older people are moving in. So that kind of, again, points to aging in this region in the future. But you can also select by different things. So you'd like to say, show me education, for example. The green line's highly educated. At the moment, highly educated people are tending to move into the region. That's good news. But that's likely to decrease, but still be positive in the future. Now, if you're a policymaker, that's potentially a skills gap that you might be concerned about, that you might want to address. And then lastly, down here, we've got a population pyramid showing you the structure of the population sort of in 2020, but you can also scroll forward, say, show me what my region's going to look like in 2035. In this region, more aging is the answer of what's going to happen here. So something you want to react to as early as possible. So going back to the home page, that is Portal 1. Now moving on to Portal 2, so zooming out and looking at regional development at the European scale. So if I click on that and the map loads, you can see this map color-coded by its overall regional development score. You can zoom in and move around, as I said. And also you can break this down. So if you want to see these different dimensions of regional development, if that's something that you are interested in, you can do that. So say, show me the landscape of social development in Europe. You can do that. You can also scroll back in time here. So you can say, show me the picture in 2013. And if you do that, the graph updates. Now that's useful if you're a policymaker wanting to know, am I keeping up with my neighbours? Am I falling behind? Am I progressing at about the same rate? So again, helping you understand where you fit into that big picture. And moving on to the last portal, Portal 3, which looks at migration and population at the European scale. And the first thing we've got here are those migrant perspectives. Now, I am a quantitative researcher. I like data, I like numbers, but I'm also really conscious that there are things that you can learn best by talking to people, that doing data would be much, much harder to get to those answers. So that's why we wanted to include this in the project. Now, if you're a policymaker, you might want to know about the perspectives and the experiences of people that migrate, the people that move back maybe. But it's really hard to go out and find, hundreds of people to talk to and hear what they have to say. But the good news is you don't have to, because we've done it for you. So we did interviews with migrants across Europe and summarised, the key sort of points they were making here in a list of quotes. So let's just pick one here. The Dutch hold higher positions. We just pass by them, see them in the warehouse, but they don't do the same work as we do. Very friendly, really friendly. The Dutch are friendly, very friendly. Honestly, I don't know any Dutch person, like not even to say hi or good morning, just the ones I pass at work. I don't know any Dutch people. I don't hang out with Dutch people. I don't talk to Dutch people. So even in this really short quote, you're getting a really kind of nuanced perspective and talking about lots of different things. So this is talking about integration, obviously, and if that's an issue that you want to tackle, knowing what this person's experienced, what they think is one of the causes of that, is useful information. So in this case, they kind of ascribe it to not just that they do different types of work to the native population, but also different levels of work. So that shows how these really short sentences and these short quotes can tell you really, really kind of detailed things. But we're also conscious there's a lot of quotes. We did a lot of work. We're proud of it. But you might want to find specific things. So you've got these tags up here that you can filter by. So let's say you want to know about people's experiences with regards to housing. You select that, and now all these quotes that are left over, they have the tag housing. You can also select by other characteristics as well. So let's say you want to know about the perspectives of women that eventually returned home, and you want to know about what their motivations were, what they experienced that made them make those decisions. You can select that, and the list of quotes updates, so you can get information from the people that you want to know about. So lots of really interesting information there. Switching back to the data aspect, this is information about population flows between different countries. So slightly scary graph, but don't be too frightened. It's essentially the lines of the different flows between the different countries, thick line, lots of people. So we're in Belgium, so we can hover over Belgium and see, where people are moving from and where people are moving to. And you can also filter that down here. So let's say that you want to know about the flow of 40 to 64-year-olds that are medium educated. And you see the graph updates. And you can also add more flows. We have a limit on the number of flows just to stop there being too many lines or it gets too confusing, but you can add more flows and smaller flows if you are interested in those. Over here, we've got kind of the population projections, again, at the kind of the European scale. So you can you can select your country that you're interested in, and you can see the population projection for this country in the future. Now, this is Austria, and the population is projected to increase. But let's say you're interested in a particular demographic. So let's say you want 20 to 39-year-olds that are highly educated. Okay, those are likely to increase as well. But if you look at like the medium educated, those are likely to go down. So in a kind of quite intuitive way, you can get and explore quite detailed data sets to answer detailed questions based on your situation. Down here, you've got information about the countries that are likely to experience population increase and population decrease in the future. And then there's a load of other graphs down here telling you lots of interesting things. I'm not going to go through one by one, but things like immigration and emigration dynamics, migration balance, gender balance, education fractions. So again, to be able to give you really detailed information in an intuitive, clickable way. And then lastly, we've got a page related to integration, so showing the landscape of integration across Europe and information here about how we make those calculations, so if that's something that you are sort of focused on. So going back to the home page again, you can see this is a really kind of detailed dashboard that we've got a lot of information in, which we hope will be very useful to a wide range of people. So with that, I will go. Sorry, I forgot one really important bit. My apologies. It's because we added the button so recently, I forgot that. on the policies aspect, a really, really important bit, the community policy. So these are policies from policymakers. We didn't just want this to be researchers talking at policymakers. We also wanted policymakers to be able to learn from each other and exchange best practice. So these are policies that policymakers have added to the dashboard. So you can see what your peers are doing. And you can also add your input. So if there's a policy that you've implemented or you've seen implemented that you think is a really cool idea that you think people could learn from or might want to know about, this is a simple Google form. You can, describe your policy. You can say this is about economic development and public health, for example. You can give a link to any documents that might, be helpful if people want to know more about it. And we will be looking over these, and we want to add them to the dashboard. So this can be a really good sort of community resource. So going back to my slides now, from current slide. So yes, that's the dashboard in a nutshell. It's a really big project. If you would like to know more, I am very, very happy to discuss it further. My email address is there. One small word on that email address, is probably only good for the next 6 months because that's when my current position finishes. So I'm looking for my next position now. So if you do want to, email me, do it within the next 6 months, or do some Googling for my new email address. So thank you very much, and I will be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Becky. It was very comprehensive, but absolutely fascinating. And I'm sure, like many others here, I just wanted to sit and read all of the quotes if I had time. Who's got any questions, any additional information they'd like from Becky? Or yeah, so we'll go.
Thanks a lot. I'm Alexia Ruby from European Commission DG Agri, the team working on the long-term vision for the EU's rural areas. Thanks. That sounds very rich and very interesting. I was just wondering if you have, from a rural perspective, thought of including some filters to, qualify what is, if you're a rural region, or how, if the rural dimension is present as a way to filter out relevant content in the dashboard, because that's something we could also promote through the Rural Pact community platform, and could be useful in these moments of policy development. But I missed the rural dimension in your presentation.
So when we do these these region types, which we use to filter the policies on, urbanisation is a key factor in that, because we are very conscious that, build an underground metro line is not a sort of relevant policy for a very rural region. So, yeah, we've got some details in the methodology page, sort of explaining more about how we do these region types. But, yeah, how we identify these region types is essentially, are you a similar development level, and are you a similar level of urbanisation? Those are kind of the two key factors we make that decision on if a policy is relevant to you on.
How do you qualify the level of urbanization?
We steal them shamelessly from the OECD, which had so they've got a typology of 5 levels, so using functional urban areas. So essentially, what access do you have? So do you have access to a city of more than 1 million people close by? Do you have access to a town of more than 50,000 people close by? So it judges the urbanization level based on that.
Any other questions? Yes, Sandra.
Thank you. I'm Sandra Jolt from the OECD, working on regional development. Thank you very much. It's a great tool. Congratulations for all the hard work behind. I have 3 quick questions. One is on, you mentioned you established the tool together with policymakers. So I was wondering, in that pilot phase, what was most useful for policymakers from these different pillars? My second question relates to whether you could envisage, I know this project comes to an end, also adding additional data or data sets that already exist in other locations. For example, at the OECD, we have country sheets on the subnational governance and finance structure of countries. And I'm thinking, when you talk about the importance of budgets and responsibilities, I mean, if you compare policies from one country and how you can apply them to your region or municipality, it may be very different if you're a very centralized versus a very decentralized country in terms of what you can do. So whether you can integrate that information, I mean, you don't need to build that from scratch. Often it already exists in other databases and how that could be integrated. And the third question is about that community hub. It's great to see that people can also include their own policies. I was just wondering, is there anyone who watches these entries? How do you monitor that? So, thank you.
Yeah, the last one, nothing goes on the website without us, checking it to make sure it's not trolling or anything. So that, yeah, those are being watched. To go to your first question, which was related to what policymakers seem to find the most interesting, I think the quotes were really well received. I think a lot of people were very interested in that work. And I think also the national comparisons was another really big thing that they were particularly interested in. I've forgotten your middle question, sorry.
It was about the integration of other data.
Thank you very much. So it depends on the data type. So things like if we were going to add a data sheet for each region, that's the sort of thing that is relatively easy to add and would be nice to, within the constraints of like EU budgets are pretty firm in that you've got the budget up until the 1st of April and then no more money. So that is a kind of complicating factor. Like technically, yes, logistically, organizationally, it's more challenging. With regards to the data itself, it's something that I would really like to, for example, to be able to keep updating it year by year. Kind of a lesson I've taken away from this is to try and build for that, because I'm not aware of exactly how you can pull from Eurostat or the OECD automatically, but I would really like, if I was going to do this project again, I would write a script to auto sort of pull that data from Eurostat and the OECD each year, run the analysis script, because that script exists. It's just a matter of putting in a different entry file, outputting a different CSV file, and then that's very easy to add to the website. So to answer your question, no, we don't have that. Yes, it would be really good. Next time, I hope.
May I also add to that? Yeah, I also liked that because I was in charge. I download a lot of policies and analyze them, and this was exactly one of the points we really wanted to do, because you could see that there are lots of policies, but it's really depending how centralized the government is, how the money is, who is responsible for what. So yeah, it would be great if we could do that. But because what we are trying to do now with all the data we're having, we're trying to analyze policy mixes. So we're not focusing on one policy, but focusing on a whole policy mix. And I always say to open up that black box of policy, you also need exactly that information. And I've looked at the OECD, at the fact sheets, but I haven't found a way to integrate that in those policy mixes. But I think that would be ideal, because it gives an even more nuanced image of policy mixes in general. So I think it's a great idea. And we need to find the money and the time to do it.
Okay, we'll go for it. Yeah, I saw a blue-armed hand go up there, and then next.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Diletta Zonta, European Commission DG Regio. I'll be working on something called Right to Stay strategy, which I believe is extremely relevant also. So thank you very much. We have, as Commission, of course, our ears wide open. I have two quick questions. The first one is perhaps if you could help us reflect on what makes regions resilient. You mentioned, for example, you have a resilient regions policy group, but what makes these regions particularly resilient? What does it take? And I wonder whether this also links to the 3 dimensions of indicators that you presented before when it comes to regional development, where, if I am correct, I haven't seen, for example, some indicators on access to schools, access to education, and I've even, of course, you've shown also in your presentations a picture of a shop, right? And that makes, I think, territories in some areas resilient, in particular where, when we're talking about sparsely populated areas or areas that are losing population. So I think there are perhaps even more dimensions that can be measured and looked at when we think about resilience of these regions, particularly if we look at the NAS 3 level, which I think makes this whole also work even more interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I can maybe answer some of this at least. I'm from Nordregio. We were the coordinators of the dashboard and also ran the workshops and recruited the Resilient Regions expert group, which we decided to call expert group because we also wanted to lay down the line that, you know, it is not the researchers that are the experts in how to deal and design policy around this. It is the people working. It's the rural policymakers on the ground. It's people like Radim who've gone back and experienced firsthand what decline looks like. So that was our outset, and so when we started, you know, it went from a testing group to an expert group because we also wanted to encourage them to share these policies in the dashboard. Now that's been unfortunately quite a late addition to the dashboard that you could add this, but it is something that we want to, ideally if we had longer in the project, we wanted to explore further, and it is developed. The developer is also within Nordregio, and it's open source. It's on GitHub, so it is something that we also encourage, that we are more than willing to share this design and also going forward with the dashboard. But your question was more about how do we know if regions are resilient?
How would you define what makes a region resilient?
Well, for us, you know, we put the reason that the policy is the very first thing you see on the dashboard is because it is how creatively and how dynamically and how you are able to intervene. We want to encourage, you know, regions to intervene with data, with knowledge, and with evidence behind their decisions, because we believe that makes a difference. But the way we say a region is resilient is how prepared and how they prevent.
I may add to that maybe a little bit. Resilient regions, if you look at the literature, are regions which have a sort of a diversified economy, a diversified society. And we build our regional development index on these three dimensions. So regions that score high on each of the three, from our data, you might say, are more resilient than those who are only in economic sense sort of high flyers. If they are not socially and environmentally high, then something is missing, and that is something maybe a little vague, but still it has something to do with resilience. And yeah, you are strong in multiple dimensions.
Yeah, and maybe also to add, I think really quickly, because I started my presentation also with one of those examples, the supermarket, people doing it together voluntarily. I think it's a combination between the diversification Leo was just mentioning, but also the local initiatives to be ready to change the narrative, to say as a community, we don't want this, we want to stick together, we want to have the facilities there. And that's also something which really promotes resilience. And it's difficult to grasp, but I think it's enormously important.
Thank you. Okay, well, I see a hand over here for questions, and then Radim, and then at the back. So.
Yes, hello, my name is Laura. I work at the EU Institute for Security Studies. This is obviously super useful data, and it is obviously a lot of work and requires funding, but I'm wondering if there is any project or idea to extend it beyond European countries to be looking at external migration into the EU. Thank you.
I think from the regional development standpoint, I think that a major challenge of that would be just the data availability. Like Eurostat was one of the major cornerstones of most of our data. So, and even then, the harmonization of the data was a real job. So if you want to extend it further than that, you would probably have to use a much more limited set of data and indicators, things like GDP per capita, which is pretty widely recorded. But even then, you can get differences in how different countries exactly define different things. So from the regional development side, I think that is a major challenge. Just the data harmonization aspect, I think, is a huge barrier to that.
I have a very difficult question, because when I see this data, and also this research, it's really amazing, and I try to be a mayor with opened eyes, even in the Committee of the Regions, but I've heard about this for the first time, even about this project. Sorry for that, but I know about OECD, I know about the JRC, etc., etc. So a lot of data, which is of very high quality, and how to make it for the policymakers to be used, Because, you know, I know it myself. I am a researcher in international relations, so with Trumps, etc., it's difficult even more than with mayors. But, you know, it's a pity because we are talking about place-based approaches, tailor-made approaches. You know, exactly as you mentioned, it's about the complex. It's not about one policy, you know. It's about the complex of the policies because they are interconnected. We are talking about integrated instruments, innovations, etc., etc. But how to make it so that the data are used, you know, by the policymakers.
Well, that's been our goal. I guess it'll be for policymakers such as yourself to decide whether it's landed or not. Yeah, we've tried to make it as policy forward as possible. So the first thing you see in Portal 1 is the policy suggestions. So we really took a answers first, details if you want them kind of approach to the dashboard, which is why we have the policy suggestions as that very first thing within the first portal. So I think that's kind of one of our approaches. Again, working with the Resilient Regions Expert Group, trying to highlight the things that are most relevant to them. It's a very big project. There are things that didn't get included in the dashboard because they were more detailed or more technical or more theoretical. So I think that sort of like filtering aspect was one of the things that we did. Yeah, I would say that we have tried to make it for policymakers, and it'll be for policymakers to decide if that's succeeded.
Yeah, and I think a lot of policymakers are here today. I've been in other projects, other research projects where we ended presenting for ourselves basically, or for other research, and I think there's a whole group. So you are also, you must have heard of it. So I think that's also one element, and hopefully it spreads out even more.
Okay, yep, sorry, go ahead, Leo.
And maybe if you phrase it well, there's a lot of data about how to make it relevant for policymakers. I mean, we do have a lot of data, but we made a jump towards, well, you might call it data, but it's policies and it's migrant experiences. So that is qualitative information linked in a specific way to these data. So we really made an effort to bridge the gap as you questioned, in a sense. So I invite you heartily to jump into the dashboard and see if our answer is somehow a step towards what you are looking for.
Okay, very end of the back row, please.
Thank you. My name is Kirsti Meti. I work for the North Norwegian European Office. First of all, thank you so much for this very interesting dashboard, and thank you for including Norway in it. It's always such a pleasure for a non-EU member. So my question is concerned with maybe what I would call the democracy indicator somehow, because you have made a tool for policymakers, and the degree of empowerment in local and regional authorities are very different in Europe. Some regions have a lot of autonomy, others are more victims of centralized policies. So the level of local and regional policymakers to be able to have the initiative and to feel that they can in fact do something about a few policy areas is variable. So I was just wondering if this type of degree of democratic power or empowerment is included in some of your work. Thank you.
Yeah, we were very conscious. I pressed the button, but apparently not hard enough. Yes, so that was something we were very conscious of. In our original draft of the different dimensions of regional development, we also had a fourth one, which was policy, so like political engagement and, you know, how democracy worked and, you know, voter turnout and things like that. But ultimately, we just found that there was such difference in the way different countries operate and administrate their regions, the levels of power and so on, that we just couldn't really get it to work. So we used the other three. So to say, we were very, very conscious of this as an issue. But there's just too much difference between all the different like EU 27 countries to tailor that within this project to make the policies applicable to what is within particular policymakers' power. But I would really emphasise that this dashboard is for policymakers at all levels. So it's aimed at regional development and regional improvement, and in an ideal world that is regional policymakers that know their region and love their region and are passionate about helping them, that can drive that change and have the power to do that. But if it is, somebody in central government that wants to improve, access to healthcare at the regional level, this is still a useful dashboard because it has that data at the regional level for that higher level policymaker to use. So when that is that different distribution of power, we hope that it is useful for whoever is the policymaker in that particular context that has the ability to make those decisions. And it's aimed at informing them whatever level they are at. And hopefully it would also give ammunition for policymakers that are on a more local level to campaign and to argue for particular strategies with the data to back them up, and that kind of firepower to demonstrate, no, this is necessary and here is why.
Any other questions? I see one in the middle. And yeah.
Okay, great. So, Sebastian Morin here from the Parliament of Romania. As you might know, Romania has a very large diaspora. We are actually on the 5th place, estimated around at 6 million people, but in reality, around 10. Would you consider to incorporate in the dashboard, which, by the way, it's a very useful tool that we would need that for making policies in the Parliament, but to also include the mobility potential, like not just the people that are leaving, but also the likelihood to come back. Of course, I fully agree that we need resilient regions, but it's very, very hard to do that if you have like 25% or 30% of your population away, not in the country. So it's making the job very difficult, and I'm just having this thought for you. Thank you so much.
Leo might want to talk a little bit more about this after I've finished. So not so much on the dashboard, but one bit of research that I think Corey briefly mentioned in her presentation that I did that I think is very relevant to this is looking at what I did some machine learning research, basically looking at regional development and what people prioritize when they move as a function of age. And I think something that is really important for rural regions or left behind regions or people trying to attract people back is that social and living environment like aspects, because they really become a priority at age like 30 plus. And particularly for rural regions or regions that are sort of like lower performing economically, that can't compete with Paris or Amsterdam or wherever on the economics and are never going to be able to. I think focusing energy on the social aspect, on the living environment aspect where they can compete is something that is potentially very, very powerful. On the dashboard, not so much, because yeah, it's really big. It's really big, as you'll have seen, and trying to fit everything in there is kind of difficult. So hopefully that's an answer to your question. And I don't know if Leo wants to speak more on that aspect.
Well, I think it's a very good issue that you raise, indeed, especially for Romania and some other countries in the east of Europe. This is a big issue. People leaving who otherwise might have been very useful for sort of regional development of their own region. But what is currently in the dashboard is something that doesn't come close to what you're indicating, but we have one tag to the migrant perspectives on remittances and return migration. So you could have some view on that. But in order to study this in the sort of detail that you need really more detailed study on that. The dashboard has a lot of it now, but it doesn't come that close. But indeed, it would benefit from having additional information on the specifically that aspect, specifically for a couple of countries, Romania in the first place. Yeah.
Thank you, Leo, and thank you very much, Becky, for the presentation and the demo. Big round of applause for that. Thank you.